next Tuesday, let us start by looking closely at Anna. There is something profoundly, overwhelmingly tragic about watching a brilliant, historically sharp mind be casually dismissed simply because of a recent medical chart. Anna knows the absolute truth about Cassius. She knows with every fiber of her being that he is wearing the face of his deceased twin, Nathan. She sees the invisible strings being pulled. She recognizes the subtle deceptions playing out in plain sight. Yet her recent, highly publicized stint in a mental health facility has permanently branded her as an unreliable narrator in the eyes of her peers. It is the classic, agonizing Cassandra complex brought to life. She possesses the extraordinary gift of prophecy and the absolute truth, but she is cursed by her circumstances to never, ever be believed by the people who need to hear it most. When Anna desperately pleads with Felicia to investigate this imposter, she is not doing it out of malice, spite, or some twisted paranoia. She is doing it entirely for the sake of little James. She recognizes the immense, looming danger of a child being raised by a man who is living a violent lie. She is fighting a massive uphill battle from a place of extreme perceived weakness, which, in my opinion, makes her relentless efforts all the more heroic. She is willing to look crazy, to be judged and pitied, if it means she can protect a child from a predator hiding in plain sight. Felicia is listening, but the seed of doubt planted by Anna's medical history is a massive barrier to the truth. And then there is Emma, hovering anxiously on the periphery of this massive secret, desperately trying to pry any shred of information from Anna. But Anna stubbornly keeps her completely in the dark, likely believing that ignorance will protect Emma from the dangerous crossfire of this impending explosion. But this intense secrecy only breeds more anxiety and confusion. We really have to ask ourselves a difficult question here. Is protecting our loved ones by keeping them completely ignorant actually helping them? Or is it merely leaving them incredibly vulnerable to the wolves in sheep's clothing that roam our streets? By shielding Emma, Anna might just be disarming her. Speaking of wolves desperately trying to blend in, we must look at the psychological torture of Cassius. He is living a completely borrowed, fragile life. He is trying so hard to be a genuine father to James, attempting to hold onto a tiny sliver of redeeming humanity while literally wearing his dead brother's identity. But the past is a relentless debt collector and it always comes knocking. Ross has just handed him an impossible, horrific task. He must assassinate Jens at his newly discovered hideout. The walls are rapidly closing in on him, and the illusion he has built is beginning to crack under the immense pressure. Cassius is now completely and utterly trapped in a nightmare of his own making. If he disobeys Ross, he exposes his true identity, faces immediate ruin, and loses James forever. If he obeys the kill order, he crosses a dark, unforgiving line of no return, solidifying his transformation into the exact monster everyone always feared his biological father was. This is where the narrative gets incredibly interesting. Cassius is no longer just a one-dimensional villain executing a master plan. He is a cornered, desperate animal. And as we all know, cornered animals are by far the most dangerous kind because they have absolutely nothing left to lose. Now, let us pivot completely to the fascinating concept of salvation cleverly disguised as a brutal betrayal. Dante and Lulu have finally managed to track down their runaway son, Rocco, who has been desperately fleeing alongside a rapidly deteriorating Brit. In a move that feels incredibly harsh, cold, and calculated, Dante and Lulu make the agonizing decision to turn Brit over to the police. Rocco, witnessing this, is absolutely, uncontrollably furious. To a highly emotional teenager, this action is the ultimate unforgivable betrayal. His parents just handed a sick, vulnerable woman over to the cold machinery of the justice system. He sees it as a cruel, heartless, and deeply vindictive act. But here is the massive, undeniable, and darkly beautiful irony that Rocco cannot possibly see through his blinding rage. By getting Britt arrested and thrown into police custody, Dante and Lulu inadvertently, miraculously, saved her life. We as the audience know that the sinister Ross had meticulously set a lethal, inescapable trap, sending highly poisoned vials meant to end Britt permanently. The sudden police intervention, the very thing Rocco currently views as a monumental tragedy, is the absolute only reason Britt did not inject herself with that fatal poison. It is a profound, chilling reminder that sometimes the universe uses our absolute worst, most painful moments to deliver our greatest miracles. A prison cell became a sanctuary. Now, I really have to pause for a moment and actively challenge my own perspective here. Am I perhaps giving Dante and Lulu way too much credit for this outcome? Let us be brutally honest with ourselves. They did not know a single thing about those poisoned vials. They were not acting out of some omniscient, profound parental wisdom to save Britt from the clutches of a corrupt agent. They were simply exhausted, terrified parents who just wanted the agonizing chase to end and their son to be safely back in their arms. They turned Britt in because it was the logical, legal, and arguably easiest thing to do in that chaotic moment, not because they were playing a game of multidimensional chess with a rogue spy. But honestly, I have to ask, does their original intent truly matter when the ultimate outcome is survival? Even if their motives were purely driven by a desperate need to regain control, the thematic resonance of a cold jail cell acting as a protective fortress is simply brilliant storytelling that we cannot ignore. This fascinating dynamic brings us directly to the massive generational divide that is practically screaming at us right now. Just look at Sunny and Alexis. They are sitting around in dimly lit rooms, having these incredibly heavy, whispered, self-important conversations about how they absolutely must protect Danny from the harsh, violent realities of their world. They are desperately strategizing to hide the truth about Jason taking the fall for the shooting. They are acting like the ultimate infallible gatekeepers of morality, truth, and safety, convinced that they alone know what is best for the younger generation. But they are completely, almost comically blind to the fact that Danny already knows absolutely everything. He knows that Rocco pulled the trigger. He knows that Jason sacrificed his own freedom and safety to protect a reckless teenager. And while Sunny and Alexis are treating him like a fragile, naive child who needs to be shielded from the darkness, Danny is out here actively plotting his next massive move to clear Jason's name. The kids in this town are no longer content sitting quietly on the sidelines waiting to be rescued by their flawed parents. They are actively, aggressively manipulating the pieces on the board, often with more skill than the adults. And honestly, absolutely nobody proves this point more effectively than Charlotte. She recently survived a terrifying, deeply traumatic kidnapping attempt, and instead of just crying in a corner and waiting for someone to hold her hand, she is clinically analyzing the threat. She sits down with Danny and meticulously pieces together the exact motive behind the attack. She brilliantly realizes that Ross did not want her for who she is. He wanted her purely as strategic leverage. He desperately needed a powerful bargaining chip to stop Valentine from exposing his treasonous activities to the higher authorities. Charlotte is connecting complex, dangerous dots that seasoned, highly trained detectives are completely missing. We are currently witnessing a fascinating, heartbreaking shift where the children are being brutally forced to carry the heavy, toxic, and blood-soaked legacies of their fathers. Danny is carrying the immense weight of Jason's endless, self-destructive sacrifices, while Charlotte is navigating the incredibly dangerous, explosive fallout of Valentine's international spy games. They are growing up way too fast, forged in the intense, unforgiving fires of their parents' countless mistakes. It is deeply heartbreaking to watch them lose their innocence, but it is also incredibly awe-inspiring to watch them step so firmly into their own power. They are rapidly realizing that if they want to survive the impending storms, they simply cannot rely on the deeply flawed adults who created this massive mess in the first place. Finally, let us talk about the inevitable echoes of the past, because if there is one thing we know for sure, it is that history absolutely loves to repeat itself in this town. Molly is currently watching the shifting dynamic between Rick and Alexis with a rapidly growing sense of profound dread. She is quietly confiding her deepest fears to others, utterly terrified that her parents are on the very edge of rekindling their highly volatile romance. To Molly, this is not a beautiful, heartwarming reunion of soulmates. It is a terrifying horror movie she has already been forced to watch too many times. Molly intimately knows the deeply toxic, destructive cycle that Rick and Alexis share. It is a chaotic, exhausting dance of intense passion, psychological manipulation, and inevitable catastrophic destruction. We can all see the subtle warning signs, those quiet, lingering looks, the undeniable magnetic chemistry that never really faded despite the years of pain. Molly's fear is the universal, agonizing fear of every child who has ever watched their parents tear each other apart only to stitch themselves back together and enthusiastically do it all over again. It is the paralyzing fear that people never truly change. They just take slightly longer breaks between their monumental mistakes. When you step back and look at the massive tapestry of these interwoven storylines, every single one of these character threads comes back to the exact same powerful central theme: the heavy masks we choose to wear and the glaring truths we stubbornly refuse to see. Anna clearly sees the deceptive mask Cassius wears, but she is dismissed and called crazy by a society that prefers comfortable lies. Rocco sees his parents purely as cruel traitors, completely blind to the protective mask of salvation they inadvertently provided for a dying woman. Sunny and Alexis wear the arrogant mask of omniscient protectors, entirely blind to Danny's hidden, dangerous knowledge and growing agency. And Molly desperately prays that the comfortable masks Rick and Alexis are currently wearing do not slip to reveal their old, highly destructive habits. We are all just stumbling blindly in the dark, desperately hoping that the impossible choices we make are the right ones, or at least the ones that cause the least amount of permanent damage. But as we continue to watch these incredibly complex, deeply flawed characters navigate their intricate webs of lies and their desperate, clawing truths, one massive, unsettling question remains hanging heavily in the air. When the dust finally settles on all this chaos and every single mask is inevitably painfully ripped away, will any of them actually recognize the broken people staring back at them in the mirror?
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.